Air Transat Flight 236 was flying from Toronto to Lisbon. It was the middle of the night, and the aircraft was cruising calmly over the Atlantic Ocean at an altitude of 39,000 feet. This was a situation pilots face every day. Nothing unusual, nothing abnormal. But on board this aircraft, there was one thing that would change everything within moments. At this altitude, over the Atlantic Ocean, land is nowhere to be seen, only endless darkness and water below. Suddenly, the captain realized something unthinkable. The aircraft was about to run out of fuel. For any pilot, this is a nightmare. Over the Atlantic Ocean, fuel exhaustion means only one thing: death. Viewers, this incident took place on August 23, 2001, at Toronto Pearson International Airport. An Air Transat Airbus A330 was being prepared for Flight 236, a non-stop 7-hour journey from Toronto to Lisbon. For this long-haul flight, 48 metric tons of fuel were loaded into the aircraft. After all preparations were complete, boarding began at around 9:30 p.m. local time. A total of 293 passengers, along with 2 pilots and 13 cabin crew members, boarded the aircraft. The flight captain was 48-year-old Robert Pichet, a highly experienced pilot with over 16,000 flight hours. The first officer was 28-year-old Dirk de Jager, who had more than 5,000 hours of flight experience, including 400 hours on the Airbus A330. The aircraft itself was state-of-the-art, only 2 years old, with no known faults. In short, there was no lack of experience and no technical issues with the plane. After completing all flight checks, the pilots taxied Flight 236 to the runway and took off with ATC clearance. Soon after departure, the aircraft turned westward, crossing the Atlantic toward Lisbon, and climbed smoothly to its cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. On long-haul flights like this, pilots usually have little to do, as the autopilot system handles most operations. The crew simply monitors the systems and regularly updates air traffic control. 4 hours into the flight, everything was still normal. Most passengers were asleep, unaware of what was about to happen. The aircraft had reached the center of the Atlantic Ocean when the first warning appeared. At 1:00 a.m. Canadian time, the captain noticed an abnormal reading in engine number 2, the right engine. The oil pressure was high, the oil quantity was low, and the oil temperature was unusually low. This was something both pilots were seeing for the first time in their careers. They immediately opened the flight manual to understand the issue. Normally, oil temperature increases during operation, but here, it was showing the opposite. Surprisingly, the manual contained no information about this specific error. The pilots contacted Air Transat's maintenance unit in Canada, but even they had never encountered this problem. The maintenance team advised the pilots to monitor the situation and promised to follow up later. Since the aircraft continued to fly normally, the pilots assumed it might be a faulty sensor giving incorrect oil readings. But 30 minutes later, another advisory message appeared, this time related to fuel. In commercial aircraft, fuel is evenly distributed between both wings. However, Flight 236 showed unequal fuel levels. The right wing had less fuel than the left. Normally, this isn't a serious issue and can be corrected during flight. The captain opened the crossfeed valve, allowing fuel to flow from the left wing to the right. Within minutes, fuel levels were equal again. But just 10 minutes later, a low fuel warning appeared. This is a warning no pilot ever wants to see, especially on a fully loaded passenger aircraft. Once again, fuel in the right wing had dropped. Now, even the total remaining fuel was not enough to reach Lisbon. At this point, the situation became extremely serious. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, diversion options were very limited. In reality, the crew had only one possible destination: the Azores Islands, a Portuguese territory in the Atlantic. On Terceira Island, there was an airport capable of handling large aircraft. The captain immediately contacted Santa Maria Air Traffic Control, informing them of a fuel emergency and requesting an emergency landing. But even then, the pilots were not sure whether they would reach the airport or be forced to ditch the aircraft into the ocean. At that moment, only 7 tons of fuel remained, about 7,000 kilograms. Although this sounds like a lot, it was actually only 6% of the Airbus A330's fuel capacity, and it was decreasing rapidly. The question was, why was the fuel disappearing so fast? Was it another faulty sensor? Or was fuel actually being lost? Fuel can only decrease this rapidly in one situation. There had to be a fuel leak somewhere on the aircraft.